Jamie grew up in a small town that 35 years ago was rocked by a series of brutal murders. 3 high school girls were murdered a few days apart, each of whom was stabbed 16 times by an unknown psycho. The maniac was never found, and Jamie's parents, Pam and her husband Randy, who grew up in those days, remember about it and guard their daughter in every possible way. On another Halloween, the maniac returns, kills Pam and then attacks Jamie. She manages to escape by setting off an experimental time machine created by her classmate. Jamie is transported back to 1987, the day the first murder took place, and now she will do anything to prevent it, because if the maniac can be caught in the past, he will not kill her mother in the present. Slashers are one of the most popular, but also one of the most formulaic subgenres of horror. Director Wes Craven and screenwriter Kevin Williamson with their mid-90s Scream managed not so much to reinvent it as to show that the limits of the genre could be pushed. There is always a room for experiments and creative exploration. In recent years, we have already seen several attempts to look at slashers from an unusual angle. In the Happy Death Day trilogy, the heroine lived the same day, at the end of which she had to die, over and over again. In Final Girls, a group of friends found themselves in an 80s slasher, and in the comedic horror flick Freaky, a maniac swapped bodies with a high school girl. Totally Killer searches itself in the same direction. It is a slasher, crossed with Back to the Future movies and high school comedy in the spirit of Mean Girls. A lot of jokes are building on the contrast between modern teenagers who condemn racism, sexism, chauvinism and many other isms, and unbridled youth of the 80s. Of course, it is not without exaggerations and simplifications. The 80s through the eyes of the director of Totally Killer Nahnatchka Khan appear as an era of careless airheads, obsessed with sex, but you have to give Khan credit. Progressively woken Jamie with her tendency to teach and correct everyone, also turns out to be a target for jokes. Totally Killer is not limited to gags about how difficult it is for a teenager from 2023 to find a common language with the generation of Pepsi, but viewers will have to wait for something unusual for about an hour. The authors of the movie took as a basis not the most widespread theory of the flow of time, which allowed them at some point to run the plot in an unpredictable direction. Yes, Jamie manages to intervene in the actions of the killer, although it does not make her life easier, but complicates it. Because the past goes on an alternative path and she loses her main advantage, she no longer knows how events will develop. We should note that the detective intrigue itself in Totally Killer is surprisingly well twisted. It is not easy to guess the murderer, who, according to the tradition of Scream, is hiding in the inner circle of the protagonist, and the finale offers an additional twist based on time travel, so from some point the movie begins not only to entertain, but also to intrigue and thrill. In conclusion, it should be said that the movie swears a lot and speaks frankly about sex, but purely visually Totally Killer is an absolute child of the 20s. There is almost no gore on display, and nudity is presented only by a pumped-up male torso. Such times, such mores.